Hey folks, it's Greg and Janet with Strange RV Tours. Today we are in New London, Texas, in East Texas, and today we're going to show you the site of a horrific tragedy that rocked this entire town, destroyed families, and left more than 300 people dead. But first we're going to take you inside of the museum to show you some of the artifacts from the tragedy and tell you about it. This museum is housed inside of a building that used to be the High School Drug, which was a soda fountain and pharmacy that started here in 1938. This is the museum here in New London, and on March 18th, 1937, there was a horrific explosion that occurred at the school here in town. It was a natural gas explosion and ended up killing 294 students, teachers, and visitors. But this is the museum about that explosion and about the town itself. So we'll give you a little look around here, and then afterwards we're going to go visit the high school where the explosion took place, and we're going to go over to the graveyard where 112 of the victims of the tragedy were buried.
They were called the Wildcats, and it was from 1932 to 1965. It was London School of New London, Texas. And in 1965, they changed the name to Rusk High School, I believe. So this is all their memorabilia, but the tragedy happened in 1937, and that what actually did happen was the explosion from the basement shop.
And at that time of the explosion, natural gas did not have a smell.
Right.
So nobody knew that natural gas was leaking from the gas pipes, and because of that explosion, they have since put a artificial smell in natural gas, so you can, if you smell that smell, you know you have a leak. That is cool. Look at that. They have a picture of this from back in the day. Between 1934 and 1940, they had these races using these vehicles. A Maytag toy racer. And this lady right here, that was her racer that is on display right here. And this was a picture of her in it back probably sometime between 1934 and 1940.
Wow.
And New London is a natural gas and oil town, and a lot of the people who lived here in the area at the time were oil field workers that would travel from oil field to oil field looking for jobs. So there's a discrepancy on how many people were actually killed in the explosion. They estimate between 294 and 319.
The museum says 294.
Yeah, the museum here says 294.
Wow.
But some of the migrant workers may not have been accounted for.
Okay, so it says here, the natural gas accumulated in the unoccupied crawl space below the first floor of the entire west section of the building. It leaked through an open door into the manual training shop and ignited by an arc of electricity when a teacher plugged in a portable sander. And from what I understand, he had just repaired it. He plugged it in and it sparked, and that blew up everything. It blew the 8-inch thick floor slab upward through the school, leveling most of the school and killing almost 300.
And here's a placard from the original school that was in the explosion. And this is what, the third worst tragedy in Texas history?
Yeah. One was the 1900 hurricane, and then there was a Texas City industrial accident that killed over 500. Yeah, so that.
Here's a picture of the school before the explosion. And actually, the explosion happened at, I think, 3:17 p.m. in the afternoon. And first through fourth grade had been released for the day at 2:30, luckily. So most of the kids that were in first through fourth grade were not in the building anymore when the explosion occurred. But you can see how badly destroyed the building was.
Yeah.
And there's stories of parents fighting over the bodies of the victims because many of the victims were so disfigured they couldn't tell who was who, and everybody was looking for their child.
There was a brand new hospital that was supposed to have its dedication like the next day to open. They definitely just opened up for this. Hospitals all around the area took in so many victims. They said the oil field guys, you know, people from Tyler, I mean, everywhere came to just remove rubble piece by piece.
But only a portion of the school was destroyed. I think the gymnasium was left. It didn't get destroyed, so school actually opened again 10 days later.
Yeah, in the gymnasium.
But there was only, 30 seniors graduated that year?
That's the sign for the high school drug.
The building that we're in now.
Yeah, and it opened in 1938, the year after.
Wow, this was an outfit worn by one of the victims. She did survive of the explosion, the 6th grader. So she survived with only cuts and scratches.
Oh, she's writing a letter.
Wow, that's the letter she was writing too, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Copy of it. Wow.
Tough.
Gives you goosebumps, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This kid, Eddie Herman Guthrow, was a 3rd grader who took speech lessons, and he left the building at 2:30 with the 1st through 4th graders, but returned to the school to get his coat just as the building exploded. He died in the explosion.
Oh my gosh. They say that locals here that were involved really don't talk about it so much because it's so painful. And a lot of people so many people lost their children. And it was such a horrific scene. They couldn't hardly handle it. And so some people just can't talk about it. It's too painful.
Wow.
See, here's a timeline.
So this is the way that they put odor into the natural gas back then. A Peerless Type M odorizer. Strange looking contraption.
It's like a sulfur mix type thing that makes it smell like rotten eggs, you know. Took them only 17 hours to get everything gone through. With
The entire school?
The entire school. They found everybody in 17 hours.
And this was the flag that flew over the school that day.
Wow.
Yeah, the explosion was so massive that I guess there was a 2-ton block of concrete that was blown from the building 200 feet.
Crushed a car.
Yeah, it landed on a car and crushed a car, a 1937 vehicle.
This Bill Thompson, I saw an interview with him.
Mm-hmm.
He had changed seats in the classroom to sit closer to one of his friends. Well, because of the explosion where he would have been sitting previously, that person didn't survive, and to this day he has guilt about that because he moved seats. He survived, and that person that took his seat, exchanged seats, did not. And so he's only a kid, he's only 12, and it's to this day he says it bothers him because he feels guilty. But he was under the rubble and unconscious, and they did have to dig him out. But he said it was like he was in a bad dream and he couldn't wake up and he didn't know what happened. But he was in the rubble and trapped and unconscious. But they did, when he came to, it's like terrifying. It's like a bad nightmare, and he couldn't wake up from it. But they got him out, and he could hear all the people moving stuff and yelling and stuff. So
more clothing of some of the victims here. 10-year-old buried up to his chin in debris. Wow. This was the clothing that this young man was wearing when the explosion occurred. The young girl that was wearing this clothing didn't survive. There's a picture of her.
And
her name was Fidelia Lee Jones.
That was caused by a piece of steel.
Yeah, this photo right here was taken just a few hours before the explosion occurred of the girls' softball team. It's heartbreaking.
4 of the girls were killed.
This explosion was literally a worldwide event. It was such a tragedy that leaders from not just the United States but other parts of the world sent their condolences. And here's some of the Western Union telegrams that were sent. This is from a Mr. R.G. Hardy. Regret horrible accident. Assume family all right. Advise if otherwise. This one's from Eleanor Roosevelt. I want to express deepest sympathy to you and the citizens of New London in the horrible tragedy which has come to them. And actually, even Adolf Hitler sent a telegram. On the occasion of the terrible explosion at New London, Texas, which took so many young lives, I want to assure Your Excellency of my and the German people's sincere sympathy, Adolf Hitler.
But see, like I told you, see that?
Yeah.
All those side buildings, there's one back building still there, but all that front area, all the way across, is gone. So that's amazing.
Yes. What was that?
Looks like a trophy.
Yeah, it was. You're right. 4 million pounds of rock was removed in finding the bodies. This was the victims by their grades. This was the number of victims in 5th grade. And 6th grade, 7th.
And they even have girls
Mm-hmm.
and boys.
Sure enough.
Wow.
There's also 4 post-grads that died in the explosion. I think there was 16 teachers, I'm not sure. I can count them. And 4 visitors. This right here is a model of the school as it appeared the day of the explosion. When the explosion occurred, the witnesses that saw the explosion happen said that the school's walls actually expanded. Like almost like a balloon just bubbled out, and then the top of the school literally lifted off into the air. And I guess they said after the explosion there was just a deadly silence that said it took a few minutes probably for people, their ears to recover from the percussion of the explosion, but they said that the sound came back to everybody all at once.
Mm-hmm. But all I saw left was the back portion of the building, and the photos that I could tell that just this back portion was left.
Yeah.
From what I could tell on the pictures and footage.
But if you could imagine an explosion so large that it blew up the building like a balloon before the top lifted off of it and the walls blew out. This building right here in front of me is the West Rusk Junior High. Now, back in 1937, this was the New London Junior and Senior High School. This was the where the school exploded. Directly behind this school was where the old school sat. The back 10 feet of this school was the front 10 feet of the old school. It says, New London School Explosion. On March 18th, 1937, a massive explosion destroyed the New London Junior Senior High School, instantly killing an estimated 296 students and teachers. The subsequent deaths of victims from injuries sustained that day brought the final death count to 311. The explosion was blamed on a natural gas leak beneath the school building. Within weeks of the disaster, the Texas legislature passed a law requiring an odor to be added to the natural gas, which previously was odorless and therefore undetectable. This memorial to the victims of the explosion was erected in 1939. Now, you'll notice they said 296 students here, but in the museum they say 294, and then a final death count of 311, and we've also heard 316.
That's
So,
probably injuries after the explosion, you think?
Probably.
Yeah, victims, you know, that were hospitalized and didn't make it after that.
Yeah,
you
but
think?
yeah, but to this day, I think there's still a discrepancy on how many people actually were killed. And this right here is some of the victims listed, and I don't know why these victims are listed over here, because we're going to show you the main part of the memorial, and I don't know if these were added later, if they discovered later that they had passed away or what. But right over here is the main part of the monument. It's 32 feet tall. And we'll go up and take a look at the monument area. It is a beautiful monument. And even on this, up on this monument, they say 293 victims. So now we've heard 294, 293, 296, 311, and 316. Dedicated to the memory of the 293 children, teachers, and visitors who lost their lives in the London school disaster of March the 18th, 1937. We'll walk around here and show you the names of the victims. This area here was the 5th graders that were tragically killed that day. And then the 6th graders start here. A lot of 6th graders, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And the 7th graders started over here. Eighth graders.
They're in alphabetical order.
We're at the 9th grade now. 10th grade. And 11th grade. So it appears to me, I would think that the older students were in an area that the explosion didn't hit as hard. There was many fewer of them that perished.
Yeah. Who's postgraduates? Here's the visitors. There was a preschooler and a 3rd grader.
And then the teachers.
Yeah.
And the school is just to the right of the monument, and the museum is right over here just to the left of the monument. Okay, we are at the Pleasant Hill Cemetery in New London, Texas, which is about 25 miles east of Tyler, Texas, in East Texas. And this is where 112 of the victims from the 1937 school explosion here in New London are buried. Thanks for watching this video. Jan and I thought we were going to come out here and we were going to find all the grave sites that were here of the students and the victims of the tragedy. But once we got started, this one's a hard one to take. This one's really bothering both of us. So anyhow, our hearts go out to the families and the victims of the tragedy. And thanks for watching this video.
Strange RV tours will take you places with Greg and Janet's smiling faces. You might see a crazy flavored soda review or some tips to fix your RV too. So come along, won't you join us, friend, as we discover what's around the bend. Just sit right back in your easy chair. Strange RV Tours is on the air. Strange RV Tours is on